hockey. This is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
Today, Junior! America!
Steak.
For breakfast! So stand by.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steak for Breakfast podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back to America's fastest-growing and quickly becoming favorite political podcast on a not-so-busy News Friday. I'm Roan. I'll continue to be your guest for the next couple hours. It's Friday, so I've got Alan Jacoby with me.
Hey, everybody.
Guys, make sure you're also subscribed to the show. It's available across every downloadable podcasting platform. We prefer Apple and Spotify. Do all the good stuff. 5 stars, write a review, sub for free. It's great. And then check us out on social media. We're active on every platform, but most active right now on X. We're getting into this episode, so consequently, if you're hearing us first, press pause. We'll see you in a little bit. Go check out the first edition of the show today, episode 578. We caught up with Indiana Congresswoman Erin Houchin and Texas Congressman Keith Self. We talked about the busy week at the Trump White House and how the trade deals are coming, and they're coming aplenty. We're going to jump in right here and talk about how President Trump is still vying for a big, beautiful deal between Russia and Ukraine, although both parties are making it a little bit difficult. And we'll check out some of the fake news narratives that are being pushed throughout the cycle and constantly, and then moving towards that big, beautiful reconciliation package in the House of Representatives while the Democrats continue to flounder. We're going to have a state-exclusive interview after this segment to lead us into the back end of our podcast today with the one and only infamous, iconic Roger Stone. So buckle up for that, and welcome. Happy Friday. Alan, how you doing?
Great that it's Friday, Freedom Friday, and we're just weighing through all of the nonsense in the political world.
There has been a lot of nonsense. You know, J.D. Vance caught up with the press to talk about a couple things before he got on the plane to come home from India. He made a brief stop at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, poured beers for the troops, and then drank them with them. Absolutely love the job he's been doing lately. But, you know, he's got very little to no patience with the war in Ukraine, especially with embattled, I guess, overturned President Vladimir Zelensky right now.
Way overturned.
The action is heated up. There's been some assassination attempts in Moscow of high-ranking officials done by Ukrainian activists, while at the same time, Russia rained down its heaviest barrage of bombs and missiles on Kiev for the first time in well over a year. So much to President Trump's chagrin, we'll get into that in a second. Here's J.D. Vance talking about we are reaching zero barrier with these two countries and a potential trade deal. And the bottom line can't be any more clear for them to read after hearing this. Let's check it out.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do Ukrainians care the most about? What do the Russians care the most about? And I think that we've put together a very fair proposal. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line. Again, I feel pretty optimistic about it. I think everybody has been negotiating in good faith, but it's now time, I think, to take, if not the final step, one of the final steps, which is at a broad level, the parties saying, we're going to stop the killing, we're going to freeze the territorial lines at some level close to where they are today, and we're going to actually put in place the kind of long-term diplomatic settlement that hopefully will lead to long-term peace.
Seems pretty clear and cut, don't you think, Alan?
Absolutely. I love that he said what so many people, I believe, are thinking, that we put so much into this. And Zelensky, speaking about him, he's like a child. He's not in charge. And I really wish, actually, we would make an effort to see who, in fact, I know there's a lot of theories of who is controlling him out of the EU and out of the United States.
Yep.
Former Obama appointees, and you know who I'm talking about. We know who the players are, who, of course, deny it. There has to be some sort of line of communication that could be exposed, because Zelensky is not making these decisions on his own by any means. He's being told to ignore Trump and
Remain the folk hero.
yes, and he's not a defender of democracy. He's not any of that.
He's a dictator.
And I really am at the point where, listen, Donald Trump said it early on. Hey, listen, Ukraine could be Russia tomorrow. And be honest with you, I'm ready for that. I feel bad for the Ukrainian people. They're not doing anything to help themselves. I don't know what they can do, but they should be standing up against him and demanding an election and demanding that this meat grinder of a war end.
Well,
they're losing so many people.
They still got a pretty decent nightlife.
They do. I mean, the women over there wearing mini skirts. Like, hey, whatever. At this point, I have been ready for America to turn its back and say, listen, good luck and take care. We're not going to get our money back unless there's some deal that is done, whether it's us making money to redeveloping that country or the mineral deal, which I think is long gone. And it's like, hey, if you're going to end up and just look at Vladimir Putin, hey, listen, you guys are going to do what you got to do, but we be forewarned that whatever happens, but it stops at Ukraine. And listen, take it. Let them have it. We'll be over here with this big, beautiful body of water between us. And we're done. We got to write it off as a loss because we're never getting that money back. I just don't see it. And our involvement should be over.
We're going to have to do something. I mean, listen, to say President Trump isn't where you're at now, Alan, would be a little bit of an understatement because yesterday on his True Social, well, he dropped this heater. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. This statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia, and that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama, and not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? There are also houses, for many years before the Obama handover, major Russian submarine bases, and it's inflammatory statements that Zelensky makes like this that make it so difficult to settle this war. He has nothing to boast about. The situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace, or he can fight another 3 years before losing the whole country. I have nothing to do with Russia, but I have much to do with wanting to save, on average, 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. The statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would have never started if I were president. So it seems like he's there. And for Zelensky to go, again, this is the European Union, this is John Kerry, this is Victoria Nuland, this is all these people that are saying, like, keep the star status, remain the folk hero for as long as you can, because once you give in to Trump, it's all over. You're going to live in some villa in a remote portion of France. You're just going to be an obscure figure who's never going to be relevant again. Your own people hate you, so you're going to have no business in Ukraine. And once this is all said and done, you're just going to live in obscurity. So soak it up for as much as you can. Continue to get the money and launder it as hard as you have been. And at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. Hope Russia doesn't take everything. But, I mean, it's looking like that's even more of a chance happening now than it did even when Joe Biden was president. What do you think?
No, I agree. But there has to be a line in the sand.
Yeah.
He could have had it made. He cried, and his argument wasn't even making sense about the security guarantee. Your security guarantee would be Russia would not step foot back into Ukraine if there were American lives there working, knowing this deal was going on, because Putin wouldn't chance that, whether it's contractors doing this mining of earth minerals and whatever it is, military contractors, whatever it might be. Our military there in some fashion, who knows what it would have looked like, but it would have stopped everything. So you wouldn't have to worry about it. But they wanted this. We want to know that the American military will fight Russia. No, you're never going to join NATO. And NATO's a joke, in my opinion, anyway.
Yep.
It's if the EU wants to forward this war, have at it. But they've already, self-admittedly said they couldn't do it without the United States anyway. I'm done with it all. I just want us to turn our back and say good luck, and we'll be watching the news to see what happens.
True story. I mean, listen, everybody knows this. This isn't just a talking point. This has nothing to do with President Trump. Vladimir Putin meets with nobody face to face. He trusts nobody. He hasn't had the opportunity during his second term to meet with President Trump yet. However, this morning he sat down face to face with U.S. peace envoy Steve Witkoff for the fourth time since January. To think that this isn't moving in a positive direction that essentially ends the war, if at the very least that is it, then you need your head examined. Vladimir Putin has, out of respect for President Trump, met with Steve Witkoff now face-to-face 4 times. He doesn't do photo ops with people. He doesn't deal with anyone outside of the tippy top of world leaders. This, in my opinion, is a huge deal. And again, it goes back to the original point, which I made last week and on Tuesday and in our first edition of the show today. It's not Putin. It's not Xi Jinping. It's not Donald Trump. It's the rhino elements of all the people underneath these leaders in their government that wants to see the destruction of Russia and China and the United States because of the wars, both kinetically and Cold War and trade-wise for the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And some people will just not let it go, and some people don't ever want to settle on peace. And I think that driving force, plus what's going on with the woke nature of the European Union, thinking that they can literally pronounce this peace deal over the finish line, well, they got another thing coming. Because when the United States says we are done with Ukraine, we will be done with Ukraine. And much like Alan just alluded to, Vladimir Putin will roll right through Kiev and beyond and make it just another part of Russia like he did when Barack Obama let them take Crimea back in 14.
And then, of course, Donald Trump will be blamed for that.
Yep.
That'll be because it'll come back to, what Russia was allowed to take under other presidential administrations, and it'll turn into, well, that doesn't matter because now Vladimir Putin took all of Ukraine under President Trump's administration.
Right.
And they'll ignore all of the peace efforts and the deals that were laid out to Vladimir Zelensky in order to stop it. All of that will be ignored. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I'm at the point where I don't care about any of it and what the mainstream media is going to be programmed to say anyway, and what the left is going to say. It doesn't matter. What matters is we don't give them another dime. We don't give them another missile.
Yep.
We give them nothing. That it's over. And I think we're way past that. And we've done everything we could. There's no money in peace.
No.
That is what there's no money in peace. There's no money if all the good guys stay good. If all the good guys win, it's like American politics and some of the grifting influencers that we know out there so well, who run their business model of their shows of, well, if all the good guys win, that we have nobody.
No boogeyman to grift off of.
Right. There's no boogeyman to grift off of. There's no tyranny and Marxism to grift off of. And that's why I think there's such a big movement for people that are supposed to be on the same side as us, Ron, who are out there trying to subvert the midterms in Congress into having the Republicans lose the majority.
Sure.
Because then they can get back to their black pilling grift on, again, grifting off the tyranny and Marxism of, oh, look.
Again, I like to remind everybody, it's a fun talking point, but the last time those lunatics were in power, several people tried to kill and assassinate Donald Trump. So You want to play games like that and not come out and vote? Because of the boogeyman or the fact that we're not getting stuff done at the speed or pace that you want, you can play that game. But again, you're gambling with real people's lives, not just the Americans who are affected by those horrible policies or non-legislation that will be passed to end President Trump's term, but literally the president's life, which nobody wants to see be gambled with. Speaking of which, President Trump remained optimistic. Wednesday, while talking to the press in the West Wing, had this to say about what's going on in Ukraine.
On Russia, do you still believe that Putin is serious about peace given the events overnight in Ukraine? And if that bombing doesn't end, are you considering new sanctions on Russia?
So we are thinking that very strongly that they both want peace, but they have to get to the table. We're waiting a long time. They have to get them to the table, and I think we're going to get peace. We want to save 5,000 young people. I used to say 2,500. I now say 5,000. We have, Mr. Prime Minister, we have about 5,000 young people a week that are dying in that ridiculous war. And, I started out because I didn't like all the money that we were paying, and then I realized how many people were dying. And that's by far the more important element right now. I'm saying we can save thousands of people. And I don't like that it takes long at all. But I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so. There's a lot of hatred there. There's a lot of very bad blood, a lot of distrust. But I think I hope we're going to get there for the sake of a lot of young people that are dying.
Mr. President, do you have a deadline for when the party?
I have my own deadline. And we want it to be fast.
Question.
And the Prime Minister is helping us. He wants it to be fast too. And I think everybody in this, at this time in NATO, they want to see this thing happen. So we have a deadline, and after that, we're going to have a very much different attitude. But I think
interesting from the president. He put out this post. He wasn't too happy with Kiev getting the shit bombed out of it by Russia the other day. This is also from his Truth Social account. I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary. Very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done now. So, yesterday, while the Norwegian Prime Minister was visiting yesterday, President Trump, we already heard in our first edition of the podcast, turned it over to some of his administration officials. Scott Bessent answered a question on the implementation of tariffs. And then in regards to Russia and Ukraine, he allowed Secretary of State Marco Rubio to answer for him and talk about what the deal looks like in real time right now. Let's hear it.
Marco, what would you say?
Well, first of all, what was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. Both sides just have to agree to it. We've shown them a pathway forward. We've discussed those ideas. It was a good meeting yesterday. There'll be good meetings over the weekend. We've shown them the finish line. We need both of them to say yes. But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today because this war continues. And the president wants to stop it. And everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives. That's what we're trying to do here. It's not our war. We didn't start it, as you know. But we're trying to end the dying. We're trying to end the destruction. And we've shown the path forward. We can see the finish line, but both of them have to get there. We're going to do everything we can to help them get there, but they have to ultimately say yes. Both
and we are using a lot of pressure on both. If you think we're just in there because we're nice people, and we are nice people, but we're using a lot of pressure.
I like that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio kind of are like the bad cops in all of this, and Donald Trump, who usually has the heavy fist of them all, like he'll go and put a absolute banger out on his Truth Social, but when asked about it, he's got so much more of like a statement-like response to this where he like gets into it, starts talking about the history, like the lives being lost. It's a really good compliment of each other on how some of his cabinet levels officials are supporting the policies and stances of this administration. But I tell you what, much like we talked about throughout the course of this show and our last one already, Alan, the mainstream media is making it very difficult for these negotiations to go on in real time because all of the people that are speaking over Zelensky's shoulders are just getting reaffirmed in the press, and it's making Donald Trump, again, look like the bad guy because we've invested well over $250 billion into this conflict, and the media doesn't want Donald Trump to get any kind of a win out of it. Like, peace is the very least that anyone will give Donald Trump for ending this conflict, like the stopping of the killing. But God forbid we get rebuilding contracts or some kind of rare earth mineral deals or, partnership in some of the energy sectors that they've got going on within Ukraine as well. And Donald Trump, again, is literally waking up the echoes of Hitler because maybe this is what Hitler would have done if he was alive today. You know what I'm saying?
No, I agree. And we also have to blame a lot of our politicians, Republicans and Democrats,
sure.
That are interfering with it. And that being said, I just happened to look over my X account and literally about, a half hour or so ago, 1:48 p.m., Senator Chuck Grassley puts out a tweet. I've seen enough killing of innocent Ukrainian women and children. President Trump, please put the toughest sanctions on Putin. You ought to see from clear evidence that he is playing America as a patsy.
Oh.
How about just shut the fuck up, Chuck?
First of all, that was Chuck Grassley's staffers writing that tweet, not him.
Of course.
We've all heard Sleepy Chuck talk over the course. I mean, I think outside of people like Larry Kudlow, those are two people that need to get put out to pasture yesterday.
91? Something like that?
He's up there, man. I think if he runs for his next term, he'll be in his 90s. I think he's high 80s, though. You know, it's ridiculous. And, you know, the way that these politicians, again, senators think they're the presidents of their own states. And House representatives, well, apparently they think they're just presidents of everything. If you've seen some of the retards running around in the Democrat House of Representatives over the course of the past couple months. But
they're fighting the oligarchy. Relax.
Yeah. Flying around on a private jet that was rented for $250,000. Yeah, good job, Bernie, you dumbass.
Fighting the oligarchy.
I can't wait to ask Roger Stone about that because I know, number one, he hates Bernie Sanders' guts. And number two, I know he doesn't respect AOC at all. So I'm definitely going to be asking him about those two winners. But speaking of which, and while sitting behind the Oval Office, surrounded by Trump was right about everything hats, yesterday, before he put a cap on his week, President Trump was asked again about the developing situation in Ukraine. Let's hear it.
And if I can solve it because of a certain ability, that would be great. And if it doesn't happen, I will say that I think Russia is ready. And a lot of people said Russia wanted to go for the whole thing. And I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that Zelensky, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far it's been harder, but that's okay. It's all right. But I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it because I'm looking to save, and you know, we spend a lot of money, but this is about a lot of humanity. This is the worst. I get the pictures, the satellite pictures. I've never seen anything like it of the fields after some of these battles. It's horrible that it's going for nothing. We would have never had this problem. You would have never had that war if I were president. I guarantee you that. And for 4 years, you didn't have it.
Crazy. It's crazy. You know, I just, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think we'll get maybe a little bit of a rallying of the troops or reading of the riot act during the Pope's funeral services over the weekend. And once President Trump makes his historic trip through the Middle East, he's going to be looking to seal the deal on this. Something that could shock me a little bit, caught me off guard this morning. First of all, I can't stand Brian Kilmeade. He's like one of the biggest Ron DeSantis enjoyers in all of the mainstream apparatus and on Fox News. But they hosted the NATO Secretary General for a brief interview segment. And when it got to talking about the war in Ukraine, well, again, this kind of caught me on my heels a little bit. Listen to what the NATO Secretary General had to say about the U.S. involvement in the peace negotiations.
It is thanks to President Trump that the deadlock is broken. It is the US, it is President Trump who is taking this leadership role, and it is only the US and President Trump who can do that, together, of course, with Secretaries Hexet and Rubio, and with National Security Advisor Waltz, being closely working with him to get this done.
Now you're telling me NATO wants President Trump to end this conflict in Ukraine? Like, it's still the best timeline ever. But I think they do also know, the governing body of NATO, what the ultimate consequence here is if we can't get this war to come to an end. At some point, Vladimir Putin will tire of this to the point to where he's going to say, like, listen, Donald, I love you. I respect you. You know that. But got to make some moves. And at that point, we're not going to engage them. And we've given both sides every opportunity to bring the bloodshed to a close. So we'll leave it at that and see what happens. Probably some developments coming out on this throughout the weekend as we're getting ready to jump in for our Stay Exclusive with the one and only Roger Stone. But before we do, here's another check-in with one of our partners. Friends, I want to take a minute and talk to you about cigars. Whether you're on the golf course, fishing on the lake, or doing some yard work around the house, our friend Alan has got you covered. He's launched the Patriot Cigar Company. The tobacco is hand-picked in the fields of Nicaragua, right next to where Mike Lindell picks his coffee beans. Cigars are hand-rolled, aged 3 years. You enter promo code STEAK here, you're going to get 15% off your total order. Every order over $100, free shipping, and a $10 e-gift card is included with every purchase. MyPatriotCigars.com, that's MyPatriotCigars.com, a premium smoke for freedom-loving patriots. All right, joining us next on the show today, this big Friday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, he's a political icon, New York Times bestselling author, You can't find anybody more loyal to President Trump than this guy. He's also the best dressed man in the America First movement. That means we're welcoming back the infamous Mr. Roger Stone. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you again.
Man, what a resume you have and what you bring to the table. Much like the one Donald Trump is collaborating right now. Roger, I want to lead in today. I mean, we're going to be talking about it a lot next week. We got an announcement of a rally. It's going to be happening in the to celebrate the commencement of the first 100 days. So let's start there. You know, it's been a very big night and day change for America since Donald Trump took over. The Democrats have found new ways to try and stifle or stymie the America First movement, and that's with lawfare, one of their oldest tricks in the book. You know, they don't have to have the speaker's gavel, the majority in the Senate, or even the man who sits behind the resolute desk anymore, because they could find radical activist judges to injunct or impede legislation or executive orders coming from the president with the stroke of a pen. Outside of that, though, and all of the things we have seen President Trump able to accomplish over the course of the first 100 days, there's the rebalance of the trade imbalance across the world. There's the securing of the U.S. southern border. There's the deportation of criminal illegal aliens. There's the stock market, which seems to be on the rise again as inflation and the cost of things are low. This isn't your first 100 days by far. I just want to kind of get some over-encompassing commentary to lean in here on how you've seen it shake out and what do you expect moving forward?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's been the most productive 100 days of any presidency. Look, I worked for Ronald Reagan in 3 presidential campaigns. I think he was a very great president. I think he achieved many great things. But in all honesty, looking at it, I think that this 4 years in the wilderness, this 4 years of being under the tsunami of lawfare has given us a battle-hardened and more determined Donald Trump. Now, the task at hand is enormous. It's like turning around an ocean liner.
Literally.
The amount of damage that was done by sleepy Joe Biden, or really the people behind him, because I think we all recognize he wasn't running anything. He didn't even know what day of the week it was or where he was. It was enormous. Some of it is almost hard to grasp. I mean, 15 years ago, if anybody thought that they would allow men to play in women's sports, you would have been called insane, right, for example. Or if anyone argued that there were more than 2 genders, men and women, you would have thought that that was complete insanity. But the radical left in this country is insane. They did a huge amount of damage to the country in 4 years. Probably the greatest single damage they did was opening our southern border and letting, who knows, 20 million perhaps illegals in, including murderers, rapists, violent terrorists, not to mention the weapons that they brought into the country. Trump has to fix that. He's done it first by sealing the border, because when the bathtub is running over, the first thing you have to do is turn off the faucet.
Great point.
But now you have judges elected by no one, judges who in the past have already proven that they're partisan. Judge Boasberg, he's the guy who let the FISA court spy on Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. He and Judge Amy Berman Jackson, she's a piece of work. She was a judge in my case. They both showed up, not wearing their robes, but to sit in the audience when deranged Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump on non-existent crimes pertaining to January 6th. So correct. They have shown their colors. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know the solution. I do know that at times of war, presidents like Roosevelt and Lincoln did suspend habeas corpus to do what needed to be done. And I also don't quite understand when Judge Boasberg rules against Trump, who's going to carry out that order? The Trump Justice Department? I don't think so. So this is going to be very interesting to see the way this unfolds. Why the Democrat Party has decided to pitch their tent around the deportation of a person who they keep describing as a Maryland man, who is in fact a legal resident of El Salvador, and who is unquestionably a member of a gang, a violent gang. He has their tattoo on his knuckles. Why you would want to pitch your entire argument, your appeal to the American people around that It's baffling. It really is baffling.
No, it certainly is. And where we've seen so many successes, it's cloggages of the news cycle with stuff aforementioned by you just now that the Democrats just won't let go. So I think it's pretty clear our listenership, your listenership, everybody in the America First movement understands where the Democrats sit policy-wise, stances on social issues, and things of that nature. Roger, for someone who's been in the game as long as you have, working for so many presidents, being parts of so many campaigns all over the country, you've seen what the other side of the aisle, what the best and brightest look like, and kind of where we're at right now. Is this the biggest leadership vacuum you've ever seen within the Democrat Party, or at least maybe in modern day? And, you know, with people out there on the trail right now, like Bernie Sanders, who's going to be 87 by the time we have another presidential election, or more of the radical progressives like AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Hakeem Jeffries, where do they get all of those Democrats who voted for Donald Trump because they were sick of the BS in the last election? They saw through the media lies. They saw the lawfare being used. How do they use candidates like that to try and bring people back to the party and have any kind of successful elections moving forward?
I don't think they can. I mean, look, the Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman, the Democrat Party that believed in capitalism, a strong national defense, free enterprise, God. That Democrat Party is dead. It's been taken captive by a group of leftist, socialist, and communist freaks. And when they say Chuck Schumer is too conservative to lead the party,
right,
that tells you something. Bernie Sanders is interesting. He used to criticize millionaires and billionaires. You notice now he just criticizes billionaires. That's because Bernie and his wife skimmed millions of dollars from his two presidential campaigns in media commissions. Bernie's driving a top-of-the-line Mercedes, has multiple vacation homes. You see, he loves socialism for thee, but not for Comrade Bernie. The man's a hypocrite. Just the sound of his honking voice is annoying. It's the same old socialist crap that doesn't work. But if that's the face of their party, go ahead and nominate him. Or maybe an AOC Jasmine Crockett ticket. That would have an average IQ of somewhere in maybe the high 70s. But that is the face of their party. I don't think, for example, that AOC will challenge Chuck Schumer in the New York State Democrat Senate primary. But if she did, she could actually beat him.
Sure.
That tells you where the state of the Democrat Party is today.
It's wild, but you know, the scary part for me is the Senate map looks very favorable for Republicans into the mid-2030s right now. I think if Donald Trump continues to have a successful presidency, it will lead into a successful successor occupying the Oval Office from the Republican side in 2028. But the House of Representatives is kind of a weird equation that goes into every 2 years of the election cycle. It doesn't matter how far left the party goes on the Democrat side. This race usually comes down to a dozen or a few more House seats, which determines the balance of power and who wields the gavel. We all know what the other side of that coin looks like. It's going to be witch hunts, hoaxes, fake impeachments, etc. And for Republicans who have such slim margins and rely on those purple districts to maintain power in the House right now, what do you think they need to do strategy-wise to be able to get over the finish line and make sure that the second 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency is going to be led by a Republican House as well?
Well, first of all, I think you have to actually fight for every seat. So, for example, in Florida's 14th district, where Kathy Castor was declared the winner, the Republican challenger, Rocky Rockford, a former naval commander, challenged that because there were 54,000 mail-in ballots counted. And when you look at the applications for those mail-in ballots, there are no birth dates and no social security numbers because those people don't really exist.
Right.
Now, he appealed that to the House Administration Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, which, by the way, they are the final arbiter of who was and was not elected. Not the state. And they should have unseated Castor and seated Rockford, but they didn't seem to have the cojones to do that. And they ruled ridiculously that Rockford had missed some deadline that didn't even really exist under state law. That's a perfect example. Or let's take the 2 seats in Orange County, California, where more people voted than are registered to vote.
Correct.
Mr. Speaker, all you have to do is declare those seats vacant and seat the challengers. And by the way, I think the rhinos would even vote with you because they'd like to be committee chairman. So we have to fight for every seat. We need to be somewhat more aggressive about the entire election system.
Yeah, I think they're going to be able to collaborate with the Senate and pass a good reconciliation package for President Trump. But as soon as that mark is hit and they start working on things like the fiscal year 26 budget, they have to focus early on the midterms because it is a critical component of what the eventual Trump doctrine will be. All right, Roger, I want to talk about some of the other things that you've been working on and some of the things you've been promoting on your shows, through your Substack, on your radio program as well. It looks like Letitia James is running into some issues legally, whether it's over marriage certificates or where she's trying to fill out or register mortgage applications and things of that nature. Why don't you tell our listenership a little bit about some bad news that might be coming for the embattled and I guess you could call rotund New York State Attorney General?
Well, this corpulent, corrupt criminal, I think, is in big trouble. We have documented two excellent researchers, Sam Antar and Joel Gilbert, have documented a 40-year record of mortgage fraud. No, these are not clerical mistakes. They're not typos. She has repeatedly lied on her applications for mortgages. Even in 2023, just weeks before she put Donald Trump on trial in the ridiculous valuation trial, where she claimed that Trump had overestimated the value of his assets in order to borrow money for commercial real estate loans that he paid back, loans where the lenders made $40 million in interest, loans where the lenders said they would do that deal again tomorrow. She signed a power of attorney for the closing of a mortgage on a home in Virginia, where she said that she would live there within 60 days. It would be her principal residence, and the mortgage actually requires her to live there. Now, there's two problems with that. If she indeed moves to Maryland, as she said to Virginia, as she said she would do in this document, well, then she would be constitutionally ineligible to be the Attorney General of New York. And upon her moving, that office would be immediately vacated. There isn't even a hearing under New York state law. And if she didn't move, well, then she was engaged in fraud in signing that document and obtaining that mortgage. She has said, oh, no, there was an earlier mortgage application that in which I was not required to move. And the mortgage doesn't require me to own or occupy, both of which are complete lies. Printed by the New York Times as if they were facts, but produce those documents. They don't exist. In another instance, she applied for and got a so-called HAMP loan, which is for, first of all, people who have financial difficulties. And secondarily, these are for income-producing investment properties of 4 units and less. She claimed that the building that she bought had 4 units, but it really had 5, which means she wasn't eligible. By the way, some years she reported rental income, other years it just disappears from her financial disclosures. And then, as you referenced, in her very first mortgage, when she was 24, she applied for the mortgage with her father, claiming that her father was her husband, basically using his financials and his balance sheet to obtain the mortgage. But on the title, it accurately shows that they were father and daughter. No, Laura Loomer, I'm sorry, it's not a typographical error. It's 3 times in the documents that she signed it, all 3 of them notarized. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. She covered up multiple sexual assaults by her chief of staff. You're going to be hearing a lot more about that. I think that she may be either the first or the second largest recipient of money funneled to her through Act Blue, the Democrat payment processing app, in which these donors either don't exist at all, or when you go meet them and talk to them, they never gave any money to Letitia James, never mind the 25 individual contributions that the records say they gave. So I think she's got a world of hurt coming. The Federal Home Loan Financing Agency has sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding her serial mortgage fraud. And I don't, other people have been prosecuted for these exact same crimes. If you or I did them, trust me, we'd be prosecuted. So I think she's facing prosecution on those crimes alone. I suspect there will be others.
I do.
And of course, then there's the whole question of her disclosures. All of her required disclosures under New York State law have been sloppy, inadequate. Mortgages appear, they disappear, they reappear, they're recharacterized. She doesn't report rental income. Other years she does report it. And then yesterday, we learned that she's a slumlord, that a number of the buildings that she does own, that she rents out, have serious code violations. So, look, I think she's done. Couldn't happen to a nicer person.
Well, the Trump curse is real. We're going to see to the extent that it plays out. And then last thing I need to touch with you on, Roger, let's keeping up with the DeSantis's. You know, it seems like they've kind of treaded gleefully into whether it's the governor's race or whatever it is they've got going on down there between, Ron DeSantis and his wife. It doesn't seem like better days bode very well for them as well.
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important for people to understand the history if you're not a Floridian, because many people don't. And then therefore, many people ask me, why am I picking on a conservative Republican governor? Ron DeSantis was an undistinguished governor with a cheap suit and a bad haircut, running at 8% in the polls. In 2016, when Donald Trump was running for president and they were on the ticket together after Trump's nomination, DeSantis refused to endorse President Trump.
Correct.
He then repositioned himself as a Trump defender in the Russian collusion hoax, got a lot of Fox TV time, a lot of talk radio. That was Donald Trump's first impression of him. And in 2018, when he was running for governor, he was at 8% in the polls. The state agriculture commissioner, who was the favorite of the party, was at 53. Congressman Matt Gaetz convinced President Trump to endorse DeSantis. DeSantis's candidacy took off like a rocket. He was easily nominated, but then, frankly, he was such a piss-poor candidate with such bad interpersonal skills. President Trump had to come to Florida 3 times in the final 2 weeks to literally drag Ron DeSantis over the finish line. He won by 25,000 votes out of 8.1 million cast. Now, you would think that he would have some gratitude, but he had no gratitude. He instead elected to challenge the man who made him. In all honesty, if Donald Trump had not endorsed Ron DeSantis for governor, Ron would be managing a McDonald's someplace outside of Tampa right now.
Agreed.
Now that he cannot run for re-election, he's constitutionally prohibited from running for another term. He wants to run his overbearing, pushy shrew of a wife for governor. What her qualifications to be governor are, that's a big question. In the meantime, they've just been caught essentially stealing $10 million from Medicaid funds. These are funds that were supposed to go for health care for the poor, for the disabled, and for the elderly, putting it into a slush fund controlled by Casey DeSantis, and then funneling it to 2 political campaigns that opposed a constitutional amendment that was on the ballot in Florida that would have legalized marijuana. Medicinal marijuana is already legal in the state of Florida. I think that's a federal crime. I also think their appointed attorney general, Mr. Uthmeier, was the guy who moved the money. So he's a co-conspirator. I think this is the end of her gubernatorial candidacy. I think it is the end of the DeSanti. I don't think he'll ever hold public office again. And if she chooses to run for governor, and I hope she does, frankly, I think Congressman Byron Donalds, who is the candidate endorsed by President Donald Trump, will beat her like a drum.
Yeah, that's to say the very least. Byron Donalds looks very strong right now. I think he's going to be great for the state of Florida and moving forward. The continued advancement of the America First movement. Listen, Roger, heading into the weekend right now, I couldn't have asked you to give our listenership a better treat than you have for the last 20 minutes or so, but we really appreciate it. Always so much information that's shared when you come on the show. We've got everything live linked in our show description today, link to your website, a link to your Sunday show on WABC in New York as well. Tell us where are other places we could find you or where we could find you on social media. We'll live link that as well.
Well, I mean, it's very, very, very exciting. 77 WABC has now given me a primetime show 5 days a week at 8 o'clock p.m.
Excellent.
Wherever you are in the country, you can listen to it by going to WABCradio.com worldwide. It's an hour-long show. General Flynn joined us last week. Alex Jones was with us a few days ago. It's a very quick-moving show. Sundays, I'm still doing 2 hours from 3 to 5 at the same place, 77 WABC in New York. Folks can go to stonezone.com and they can see everything I'm doing. I just put up a piece on Ron DeSantis. The highest insurance rates in the country, the highest utility rates in the country, the highest housing costs in the country. This is a guy people keep telling me is the best governor in the country. Sorry, I don't agree.
Well, I agree that we had a great time chatting with you today. This is the man, the legend, the political icon, Mr. Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us on the show this week. Sir, have a great weekend, and we hopefully will see you again soon.
Great to be with you. God bless you.
Secretary Pete Hegseth, there's been staffers who've come out saying that he's not fit for the job. Do you still have confidence in the secretary?
Look, I have 100% confidence in the secretary. I know the president does, and really the entire team does. It's one of the most bizarre things about the Hegseth nomination. From the very beginning, the media seemed to want to tank it. And when they failed and they got confirmed, they decided they wanted to keep on that effort to destroy Pete Hegseth as a man, as the Secretary of Defense. I think he's doing a great job. I think that he's brought a certain spirit back to the Department of Defense. And if you look at our military recruitment numbers, that's, in my view, the best testament to his leadership of the military is that for the first time in a very long time, we don't have terrible recruitment problems in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. That's a great testament to his leadership, and I wish, frankly, the press talked more about that and not about anonymous sourcing from random staffers.
All right, jumping back into the news portion of the show here. Last news segment on the back end of 2 Big Friday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. I'm Ronan. I've got Alan Jacoby with me.
Hey, everybody.
And that was the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, yesterday before they returned from their historic trade trip to India, talking about some of the fake news narratives that are coming out there and the scalp that the Democrats continue to go for, namely the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. According to the Vice President, according to the President, according to the Secretary of State, and many others from the administration, Pete Hegseth isn't going anywhere. They don't care if he single-chatted memes about blowing up Houthis to Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, or even his own mother. What he's doing for the military right now is generational, and it's going to set us on course to have our military bold, bright, strong, and war fighting again. Alan, what do you think is the media? I mean, if it's not Singlegate, it's MS-13. If it's not MS-13, it's Trump's violating the Constitution by circumventing these judges' decisions. They've got like a rotating wheel of things that they throw a dart at, and depending on the week and how they're feeling, that's how they want to attack the president and his administration officials. Doesn't seem to be resonating with the American public, though.
No, not at all. And listen, as far as Pete Hegseth goes, he's an outsider. He wasn't a general. He's not part of the military deep state establishment, and therefore he's the right guy for the job. So when Trump-hating rhinos, when Democrats, when deep state operatives that have been embedded in government for decades and decades, and the mainstream media and Democrat politicians go at Pete Hegseth for nonsense with their anonymous nonsense sources, we know he's over the target and that he is perfect for the job, and that's why he's there. He just cleaned house today and fired all the Pentagon advisory committees, including that whack job Susan Rice.
Yep.
That was sitting on one of them. He's bringing merit back to the military. He's out there meeting with military members, doing training with them, calisthenics, doing all sorts of things that I don't think you've ever seen, at least I've never seen a Secretary of Defense do. I think this is a great person to lead the military. They're trying to stop him every way possible and subvert his leadership by telling him that he can't ban these mentally ill trans maniacs from being members of the military that should not be in any type of role, in my opinion, but especially combat roles with competent soldiers, and put them at risk, plus the amount of money it's going to cost us for the ridiculous medical care for that, because they all want their hormone therapy.
Yep.
Listen, Pete Hegseth is the guy. I don't care about Signalgate. I don't care about, the anonymous sources of him drinking He's got a few tattoos. They hate him for that. They lied and vilified about that. And listen, as I'm so happy that the mainstream media is not getting the scalps that they're trying to pressure Donald Trump in giving them.
Agreed. I also saw this just in. We talked about it in our first edition of the show. So a second radical activist judge, this time a county judge from Wisconsin, was arrested today by Homeland Security investigations, a component of the Department of Homeland Security, for aiding and abetting ICE from picking up people who are deportable from said Wisconsin County courthouse. So apparently the way it went down in layman's terms, when the court hearing was over, she told the ERO agents that the illegal aliens who have just gone through their court process are going to be over there. Meanwhile, they were essentially ushered out the back door and whisked away, much to the chagrin of Tom Homan and ICE. So that is clearly obstruction of the law. Tom Homan has laid it out a bunch of times. So is Pam Bondi. She's now sitting in jail. Sitting Democrat Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey put out a statement today that this is now the rise up against moment for this country against the Trump administration for arresting this judge. This comes on the heel of another judge earlier this week in New Mexico. He and his wife were both arrested for having MS-13 gang members literally live in their fucking house. It's unimaginable. And you would think I'm making this stuff up, but it's wild. This is the stuff that's really going on. And now, in lieu of these people being held accountable for these instances of radical activism, the Democrat Party, a sitting U.S. senator, is telling people in the streets to rise up against the Trump administration. This is nuts.
You will get the mainstream media now, of course, going into the weekend with Sundays, how Donald Trump is now at war with the judiciary because his administration has arrested 2 activists, felonious criminal judges. Okay. And, this woman, whatever her name is, Hannah Duggan from Wisconsin, she's charged with 2 felonies. And she bonded out. They tried to get her to talk after the hearing. She didn't. She got her fat ass into an SUV. And
she looks like Grimace.
What's that?
She looks like Grimace.
She looks like, do not insult Grimace like that. It's my favorite McDonald's character. Come on. So
I've always been
she
more
looks
of a
like Barney. I hate
guy.
Barney.
She does look like a Barney. Yeah, she's just a fat, ugly hag. Looks like she has about, 12-ish cats and questionable hygiene.
Questionable hygiene. So again, this will be, and it already is online on all the and news platforms that the left operate, that Donald Trump is illegally arresting judges for defending people and advising them of their rights. No, she didn't. It was a classic cartoon where, oh yeah, the bad guy's over there, as they're running out the back door. And then you have, again, a New Mexico judge, like you just mentioned, harboring illegal alien gang members on video playing with weapons.
Yep.
I mean, listen, where there's 1 activist judge, there's 2 activist judge, where there's 10 activist judges, there are probably hundreds of them that operate just this way. Is this going to be a message where now they're not going to be doing this, or they're going to be extra careful about it? Or are we going to see more judges being arrested for different things? I mean, this doesn't even count with the judiciary nonsense that's going on against the Trump administration.
Good point, but it's not like these radical activist judges meet these illegals by heading over to their local Home Depot parking lot. They meet these criminals inside of their courtroom where they're being charged with heinous crimes, and instead of going to jail or honoring ICE detainers and turning them over for deportations, they're literally taking them home and letting them live inside of their house. It's crazy. It is absolutely wild. And sticking in this thread, last clip I've got of J.D. Vance before he jet set back to the United States, he touched on the MS-13 gang member who's now rotting in CCOT, someone who, the Maryland man, that the media just won't let go. Let's hear it.
Omar Abrego Garcia's wife has been very vocal about how she doesn't think he's getting due process, and she now also fears for her safety. Do you have a message to her specifically?
Well, I don't have a message to his wife. I mean, look, I just disagree with the idea that he hasn't been offered due process. He had a couple of immigration hearings. He had a valid deportation order. I think this idea that somehow that we couldn't deport an MS-13 gang member, and he was an MS-13 gang member, is preposterous. And I think there's actually a deeper issue going on, which is that you see some radical judges at the district court level who are trying to layer so much quote-unquote process on top of the immigration system that it makes it impossible to function. We have over 20 million illegal aliens in the United States of America. Are we not allowed to deport them? Because if we're not allowed to deport them, then what these district courts are saying is fundamentally they reject the will of the American people as it was expressed in November of 2024. We just reject that. I believe the American people elected President Trump to do many jobs, but perhaps the most important job was to bring down the number of illegal immigration in this country. That's what he's trying to do. We're going to keep on doing.
Tell you what, if we really start deporting people out of this country, Democrats are going to have a hard time winning elections anywhere moving forward. It's the truth, though. It's the truth. It really is. Yeah, it's sad but true.
It's just wild how these. It's expected. It's expected. This was all part of the plan before Donald Trump was inaugurated. They knew that they had to get these activist judges in line. Okay, I mean, bring back an illegal gang member from El Salvador. Restore funds to schools practicing DEI. Sanctuary city funding. How about dropping a proof of citizenship mandate for voter registration? These are American judiciary judges that are literally ruling against the fundamentals of our country, the rule of law. It's wild. And I want to see more judges held accountable. I think a lot of people do. The Supreme Court, it's a crapshoot with them too.
It is. It certainly is. No thanks to Chief Justice Roberts and Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who seem to rule with their emotions a lot more than they do the Constitution. I know it's become increasingly frustrating to listen. Going into this last election cycle, I used to think if we swept the big three, I knew things were going to be tough, but I saw a window where maybe Alito and Thomas might be able to retire because they're both up there in age.
Right.
At this point, I would say, man, I'd roll the dice on J.D. Vance winning the election in 2028 for either one of them, God willing and health permitting, to be able to remain on the bench because, I mean, you put two people in there that are more moderate, like a Roberts, like a Coney Barrett, and all of a sudden the balance of power goes back to the Democrats in ruling on a lot of these social issues, especially things like transgenderism, alternate versions of education, and things related to the immigration system. It seems like Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts view these as like human rights issues instead of constitutional sovereignty issues, which is exactly what it is.
And that's the problem, that they need to be ruling along the lines of the Constitution, not what they feel is right in a human rights sense. Yeah, they're humans. They have rights. They're going to be treated civilly and just as long as they're here, and we're going to get them out of here. And then whatever happens to them, happens to them. It's not our problem. This isn't what the founding fathers envisioned. This isn't what our country envisioned with bring us your poor, bring us your sick. No,
Right.
this is import the evil so that we can have a one-party state. That's what the whole idea of this was. And they almost succeeded. But you know, they have failed in the sense that they're not in power anymore, but we have so much work to do. Are we going to deport 5 million people in 4 years? I mean, we can. Is it going to happen? Who knows? It's just wild what's happening, and everything's happening on so many levels, and the news feed is running so fast that it doesn't give time for people to concentrate on that one issue.
No.
On every angle.
You know, and it's sad because, all the paid activists who camp out in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes and make their lives miserable. We just don't have those on the conservative right. We do need them. You know, when these judges make rulings at the district level on things to stop the Trump administration from carrying out the will of the people, we need a couple hundred people camping out outside of their homes, blaring Guns N' Roses all night and banging on pots and pans and making their lives absolutely miserable like a lot of the Supreme Court justices have had to endure. Now, I know there are some federal laws that supposedly protect them, but we all know it doesn't happen. And, you know, even in the case where, you know, Kavanaugh was almost murdered 2 or 3 years ago, it's just one thing leads to another until it gets kinetic and physical violence and, God forbid, worse happens. And I feel like we're reaching a breaking point, as this is probably the 11 billionth time that a prominent Democrat has called for violence against the America First movement and conservative right. Sticking in this thread, and even though it was part of a snooze exclusive with Glenn Beck, Donald Trump sat down for a one-on-one interview with him this week, and they talked about this. President Trump and Glenn Beck referred to this as a judicial insurrection. I think Alan kind of framed it nicely, but we're going to listen to it in a voice we probably will chuckle at a little bit throughout the course of his answer, and that's President Trump. Let's hear him.
Some people, you know, the last administration, they didn't want to check anybody's ID or ask any questions on the way in. COVID, in the height of COVID. We don't even check them for that.
Don't check them for anything.
Bring them in. Now they all seem to want to check them on the way out.
Yep.
And the judges are, I think it was Senator Mike Lee that said this is judicial insurrection.
Yeah, I think you could say that.
I'm not a big fan of Andrew Jackson. I know you are. Andrew Jackson took care of this constitutionally.
Right.
Would you consider taking care of this some way or another with the judge?
All right, I'm just going to pause that for a second. Why are you going to ask him such a complex constitutional question like that and put him on the spot? As soon as I see President Trump, he did like the double eyebrow raise. And then when he's like, I don't like Andrew Jackson, and President Trump's just staring at him, he's like, but I know you do. And he's like, yeah. And then looks down. I was like, oh, here we go. All right. Let's hear the answer.
Andrew Jackson took care of this constitutionally.
Right.
Would you consider taking care of this some way or another with the judges in a constitutional way?
Well, I hope we don't have that problem. And I hope we don't have to get into it. But I will say we have millions of people in this country right now that are criminals. And you see how fast we're getting them out. And we're going to get them out even faster. But when you have to get out and do court cases for individual people, and you would have, in theory, millions of court cases, you know what that means. If you had one court case, it takes forever. Millions of court cases? They're really saying you're not allowed to do what I was elected to do. I was elected for a very big part of it was the border and getting people out, because I said, and the stats reveal it, when you look at Tren de Aragua, when you look at MS-13, when you look at these gangs and just really bad criminals coming in, you know, we have many murderers, people that killed, 50% of which killed more than one person. They put them into our country through open borders. And now we have to go to court to get them out. I don't think the people of our country are going to stand for it.
Deportations, funding sanctuary cities, and proof of citizenship to vote are three of the big legal hurdles that we should see getting towards the Supreme Court in a very swift manner, as all three of those items have, gone not in favor of the Trump administration and essentially the American people's will through the message that they sent at the ballot box. I mean, Alan, how much longer is America going to be able to take this before something breaks?
You know, it's the always the same question. How long can we put up with it before, it breaks? What breaks? I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. I feel like Donald Trump would be the one to break the judiciary insurrection in place. And I think that with the help of Congress, I think Congress needs again to grow some balls and do some major defunding. Listen, I think the entire DC circuit
and New York.
Listen, you can do that too, but minimally DC, there should not be a federal court system in DC. It should be farmed out to other districts because of the unfair jury pool that swims in DC. I don't know, man. I hope that the Supreme Court really does the right thing when these cases get to them. How does a judge allow people to register to vote without proof of citizenship? Or I don't that's the biggest thing I don't understand. And yeah, the whole bringing back of deported illegals, no matter if they're gang members or not. Now, who the hell is the courts to say that they're here illegally? There's deportation orders, or there have been deportation orders, and they've had hearings. Have you ever heard of anything like any of this before in your adult life?
Never.
Restore funding. There is no separation of power that I see between the executive branch and the judiciary. The executive branch says, we're going to do this. And the judiciary is, no, you're not. But can't give the American people, not that they have to, just give no good reason why.
Yep.
There's no clear argument why are you overstepping into the executive?
It's the truth, because shit, why are we going to even argue about proving citizenship for elections when the 2024 presidential election in regards to these cases means nothing? It means nothing. You can't carry out the agenda via executive order, via legislation. I mean, what are these radical judges going to try and do? When the Senate passes the reconciliation package and President Trump signs it into law, literally, verbatimly is the way it's outlined in the Constitution, are they going to say that that's invalid? You know what I'm saying? Now, laws that are signed into law, approved in the House, ratified in the Senate, and signed by the President of the United States are now null and void. We're hurtling towards there.
And if that does happen, that no matter what we know is constitutional and unconstitutional is common sense, the Trump-hating left and part of the Trump-hating right, I'm sure, will be on board with judges stopping a bill signed into law by him only for the fact that he is Donald Trump. Not the fact, somebody said that Donald Trump is abusing power, and it basically came down to where this leftist on social media was like, well, it's not that they hate Trump. They love the Constitution.
Yep.
They're trampling all over the Constitution. How can you say that with a straight face? And the issue is they're not, because they're not thinking rationally. It's just that hatred of Donald Trump and everything that him and his administration stands for. So again, it's just another reason, another example of the left willing to burn down every institution and the Constitution that this country was founded with out of the hatred of Donald Trump.
It's the truth. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully moving forward and see what happens. I just saw Donald Trump drop one more banger. This one, obviously, from the plane en route to Vatican City in regards to the war in Ukraine. I know we touched on it earlier in the show, but how am I going to take you guys into the weekend without reading one of these Trump heaters, especially when he's dunking on Zelensky as usual? Here we go. Ukraine, headed by Vladimir Zelensky, has not signed the final papers on the very important rare earths minerals deal with the United States. It is at least 3 weeks late. Hopefully it will be signed immediately. Work on the overall peace deal between Russia and Ukraine going smoothly. Success seems to be bright in everyone's future.
You gotta love it.
You do. And I'm going to love this last station identification before we round third and head home. Guys, wherever you're listening to the show today, hope you're enjoying now the second of two Big Friday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. Do us a favor. Share the show with your friends, family, coworkers, and loved ones. Head over to your favorite podcasting platform. We're on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, Amazon Podcast, or wherever you're hearing the show. Subscribe for free. Make sure we're downloading to your electronic device. Rate the show 5 stars and write a review. You can also find us on social media, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Instagram, and TikTok is where we have accounts. Find them, follow them, hit the notification bell. You'll never miss out on all the great stuff we've got going on down here at Steak for Breakfast. So, Alan, in final today, I do want to talk about what's going on both within the Democrat and Republican houses as they're set to reconvene up on Capitol Hill next week and get to work for, I believe, the calendar has them there for 5.5 straight weeks. So I'm sure we'll see a lot of high drama and all the other bullshit that's usually associated with such. But they'll also be working on finishing up the reconciliation package leading into the Memorial Day holiday when Speaker Johnson wants to get it to the Senate and eventually to President Trump's desk. But before we get into the Republicans and where they're at right now, I saw a segment on CNN last night talking about the revolt that's happened within the party. We touched on it with Roger Stone. I think he gave us a very good answer. We also touched on it with Keith Self in our first edition of the podcast today as well. Let's hear what Fake News CNN had to say about it.
I think is a revolt that is going on within the Democratic Party right now, Democrats and their leaders. I mean, take a look nationally. Hello, Democrats on Dem leaders in Congress. The belief that they will do the right thing when it comes to the economy. Last year at this time, 80% believed that the Democratic leaders in Congress would do the right thing when it comes to the economy. And keep in mind, this is Democrats. Look at where we are now. That number has been slashed in half to just 39%. Holy Toledo, that is the lowest number by far in Gallup polling. The lowest previous was just 60%, which is 21 points higher than this. Democrats hate what their congressional leaders in Washington are doing right now on the key issue of the day, the economy, and their confidence has fallen through the floor.
Now, that segment came out Wednesday night, but I just saw a poll on X which said that there was a 24% negative swing by independents for Trump just this week. I think now that the Democrats have literally been able to get him with nothing, Singlegate didn't work, MS-13 didn't work, radical activist judges isn't working in some context because, like I said, they say Donald Trump needs to stop deporting MS-13 gang members because DHS doesn't allot for money for that in last year's budget. Then he just puts them on a DOD plane and sends them to the third world anyway. Now they're going to start saying all the poll numbers are going in the opposite directions of probably where they already are. We had gone several weeks seeing everything from mass deportations to DOGE and overall favorability for the party and the president, all at record numbers. Now they're going to start saying, for no reason whatsoever, that all of those numbers are starting to tank. That is why when Republicans get back up to Capitol Hill this week, it is critical for them to use the next 5 to get the reconciliation package passed and to the president's desk. Now, Alan, as we exit the first 100 days next week and enter officially the 2026 midterm election cycle, tell me how important you think it is for House Republicans to have to deliver on this.
Listen, I think they're past the time of delivering. I think there were some instances where Mike Johnson should have called them back and not have taken a break so that they can at least get even some of the smaller executive orders that President Trump has signed at the Resolute desk codified into law. The SAVE Act is passed. Senate, they have to get off their ass and get it through. And those two chambers must work together, and there's no excuse why they shouldn't be. We have the majority in both. Enough of the BS. It is imperative to get executive orders codified into law. It is the reconciliation, the budget, whatever it is, everything needs to be slammed through. It should be a revolving door. President Trump should be signing multiple bills into law a day at the Resolute desk. I was hopeful and that Mike Johnson would have rose to the occasion and actually celebrated the 100th day of President Trump's presidency with bills, and the Senate, John Thune, with bills heading to his desk so he can sit there on his 100th day and sign some major bills into law. It needs to happen. If it doesn't, we're going to have a problem. We have lazy Republicans that are looking for an excuse to stay home and not vote for rhinos and not take in the full picture of what that would mean for a second half of Trump's presidency if Hakeem Jeffries got the gavel in his hand. So again, we have to get out to vote. Congress has to deliver in so many ways. And I think more of it is policy. As far as them saying that the numbers are tanking, independents were part of voting for this mandate. Okay. I don't see how they would want to go back to Democrat policy that they specifically came out to vote against. Right. But again, Congress has to get their act together and show these independents and others that are skeptical about an election coming, that Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot, that Republicans are historically lazy for anyway, off-season elections, that we have to hold the line, and we have to make sure that Donald Trump can continue his success as president.
Oh, great point. I mean, Democrats, there's a lot of infighting. There's a lack of leadership. There's no clear leadership within the party. The messaging is way off base. Republicans have an opportunity to capitalize. It starts with the reconciliation package. But if they think they're going to be able to take a victory lap on that for 18 months leading into a major midterm election, well, they got another thing coming, much as you just kind of laid out for our listenership so elegantly as you can do, Alan. I got a first clip right here of Speaker Johnson. He was on Will Cain's show yesterday. He was talking about the budget resolution, which will not include a tax increase on rich people. Now, again, this was something that Donald Trump was adamant about not being in there. You can't increase the amount of taxes on the tippy-top percent because all they do, trickle-down effect, make everybody's life miserable, raise the price of everything, including manufacturing. And again, it'll make inflation go up and it'll tank the economy. So if we're talking about tax cuts for one, including the middle class, we're talking about tax cuts for all. Here's Speaker Johnson laying it out.
The Trump administration is looking at pushing the top tax rate for those making over $1 million back up towards 39-40%. Is that something that we should expect from a Republican bill?
I would not expect that. We have been working against that idea. I'm not in favor of raising the tax rates because our party is the group that stands against that traditionally. So there were lots of ideas thrown out on the table along this process over the last year. But I would just say for everybody, just wait and see. There's more details coming, and I think you're going to be very pleased by what you see. I don't think we're raising taxes on anybody. What we're trying to do is prevent the largest tax increase in U.S. history.
I know Speaker Johnson's from Louisiana, but I do have to say, before we recorded, he actually called me brother. I got Thugonomics John Cena vibes when he dropped that on me. Like,
he dropped a brother.
Could there possibly be an arc where Mike Johnson wears a do-rag?
Oh man, what's that movie, Napoleon Dynamite?
Yes.
His brother with the do-rag. That would be Mike Johnson, I think, in a do-rag.
I just want to remind everybody, before they jump to Netflix this year, in the history of Monday Night Raw, there was only one, I repeat one, commercial-free episode ever. And those sponsors were paid off by none other than Donald Trump, as that episode was the start of the Trump versus McMahon arc, one of the most classics of the Attitude Era. We watched WrestleMania this year and last year, my son and I. We do it for the high drama and nostalgia. There wasn't so much of it this time, even though John Cena did win a very awfully telegraphed championship match. And I say that, championship match. Not like they were really doing anything. It has fallen off so bad. It is so walking the fine line of woke, and there is so much women interwoven into it. It's like you just can't enjoy it in the same way. And listen, there were women in WWE back when it was WWF. In almost every segment, there was the lovely Elizabeth, all the way up to Trish Stratus. We had China, and they were just written the perfect way. And I know times have changed, but man, have they really changed for wrestling. And the product.
The women WWF era knew their place.
Oh, the Attitude Era women, they absolutely knew their place. They were the best heels, they were the best lovers, and they were always the most scantily clad. But it's just one of those things.
Still made a great sandwich.
Yeah, they certainly did. Just to see that it's fallen off, and for how all the people, man, when they wheel out some of these old school guys from the Attitude Era, and you see just how old they are, I have to sometimes turn off the TV because it's like, if Bret Hart looks that old, how old do I look?
Oh yeah,
it's just like it's sad and scary. I don't like seeing Lex Luger come out in a wheelchair, and I don't like seeing all these guys at the end of the rung right now because they were all juiced out in the 80s and 90s. But, it's wild to see how
Ric Flair, look at him. I mean, he's like a shriveled up grapefruit. I don't know.
I was thinking
he's an old man.
That there was some way that they were going to interject him into the WrestleMania main event because, again, him and John Cena were tied for 16 apiece, right? The most ever. And I was like, he'll die. He'll die if they put him in there. I mean, I've even seen The Rock. He didn't come out this year at WrestleMania, but last year he did. And The Rock, who's in great shape still for a guy his age, he's in his early 50s, right? Yeah. He looked horrible in the ring. And then the big twist was The Undertaker came out, who's 61 years old. Yep. And just for The Undertaker to do his choke slam and bend down and get the Rock off the floor. The Rock like jumped before the Undertaker even started picking him up. I was like, oh man, these are like my childhood icons, and I'm watching them just look like me probably when I'm out there trying to exercise. It just looks sad. So, it's but it is what it is. I always show, my son loves the Attitude Era. He watches it on YouTube all the time. He always sends me like funny reels on Instagram, and it's just one of those things where, we had it so good. We just never realized. I mean, you talk about television, you talk about commercials, you talk about sports, you talk about sports entertainment, you talk about movies. The 80s and 90s, there will never be another 2 decades, I think, ever in the history of our planet.
Music.
It's just, we had it so good and we just took it for granted. And look at it now.
And I don't know how my daughter, I find her singing and listening to 80s and 90s alternative rock and other things, and I'm like, oh wow, that's she finds it herself, and she'll ask us about it, and she loves it. I'm happy that my 12-year-old daughter never became a Swiftie.
Yeah,
always despised her. I dodged the bullet there. But yeah, I'm so happy about that, and that she's so open minded to it. But how many kids aren't? Like, they don't know what good music is anymore.
It's the truth, and I mean, I see all this. I mean, my kids listen to all the stuff that's current, but they also got a complete education. I mean, my son grew up watching 80s cartoons, 90s cartoons when he was little. I mean, it was heaping helpings of Transformers and Thundercats and G.I. Joe and DuckTales and all those shows. My daughter the same way. She grew up on all the old movies. They like all the old music. I made my son, we live in Southern California. We'll probably never live in the Northeast or the tri-state area ever again. But the fact of the matter is that, my son grew up a New York fan, and it's weird to see him go out there and like know all the sports players on all the sports teams in New York. But that just means you raised your kids right when you can kind of embed that stuff on them, and then they take it personally. I tell them all the time, listen, when it comes to cooking the Italian food, when it comes to liking the sports teams, I said, you live in San Diego. Who knows where you're going to go to college and eventually live after that? It's up to you to carry on that legacy. That's the same thing my parents gave to me and their parents gave to them, because their parents were the first people here in the United States. They grew up in North Jersey, so we liked all the fucking New York teams. And, you try to get your kids to like the same stuff. It's rubbed off good on my kids, but hopefully it'll rub off on House Republicans too as well. I would like to see a little Attitude Era arc up in the House of Representatives. I'd like to see a little NW MAGA for the next 18 months leading up to the midterm election. And talking about the reconciliation package, which is going to get that ball rolling. And as our last audio clip of the week, here's Speaker Johnson a little later in that interview talking about the work that Republicans have done to this point and what it means for the House moving forward. Let's hear it.
In the last hour, Majority Leader Steve Scalise and I had a conference call with our 11 committee chairs, the 11 Republican chairmen of the committees of jurisdiction that are working on the one big beautiful bill, as the president calls it, or reconciliation bill. This is the legislative vehicle that we're going to use to deliver President Trump's America First agenda, and it's got everything in it. So it's a complicated piece of legislation. I think it can be and probably will be one of the most consequential pieces of legislation ever passed by the United States Congress. So a lot of work has gone into this. We've been working on it for over a year. But here's the update. What you'll see over the next 4 weeks is the pieces, the various components of that big bill rolling out of these committees. You'll have committee markups scheduled in all those 11 committees successively over the next 4 weeks, and you're going to see this thing come together. We are pushing it very aggressively on a schedule, as you said, to get it done by Memorial Day, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, we have the X date approaching on the debt limit, the debt ceiling. We've got resources for the border dwindling. We have market instability, and we have the urgency right now to prevent the largest tax increase in U.S. history, which is what would happen at the end of this year if those tax cuts expire.
I like it. I mean, it sounds good. Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune, one thing that they've done, and this is good about new leadership, Speaker Johnson now in his second term as Speaker of the House, and Leader Thune obviously his first as Senate Majority Leader, they are going to dissolve some of the rules which allow for commingling between the House and Senate as they head back up to the Hill and get in markups. In layman's terms, both members of the upper and lower chamber, House and the Senate, are going to work together on markups so we don't have to pass it in the House, wait for the Senate to do something about it, and then send it back to the House before they can pass it again and send it back up to the Senate to get the reconciliation package on President Trump's desk. They're going to eliminate that whole process and work together, so it's going to be more of a seamless process, as it seems. The The one thing that concerns me, they were galaxies apart on spending over 10 years. Senate wanted $4 billion. The House Republicans wanted anywhere between 1.5 and 3 trillion. They wound up settling on the 1.5 to 3 trillion, but it was at the very strong pushing of President Trump to, hey, this is what we ran on. We need to have some long-term results here. So I'm going to leave it at that. Alan, what do you think? First Friday on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and you'll be back next Friday and moving forward.
Absolutely, this is great. This is how I want to spend my Fridays, and we're gonna take this show to new levels.
Well, we certainly are, and as the music's already queued up and keyed, I guess I'm going to turn it over again to myself so I can take us out, give a couple thank yous, and let you know who's going to be on our next edition of Steak for Breakfast. Great way to end the week, especially when we end it with our great friend Alan. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and want to hear the now nearly 580 other editions of the show, you best be subscribed to us across every downloadable podcasting platform. Find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, Amazon Podcast, or wherever you're listening to the show. Download us for free. Rate us 5 stars, write a review, and you'll never miss out on all the great stuff we've got going on down here at Steak for Breakfast. We want to thank all of our guests for coming in and sharing with us today. Indiana Congresswoman Aaron Houchin, Texas Congressman Keith Self, and the one and only Mr. Roger Stone. You guys all helped make Steak great again. Guys, we're heading into the weekend. Got a bunch of stuff to keep an eye on. War in Ukraine, trade war, Pope funeral, just to say the very least. But don't worry, I'll be back on Tuesday with two brand new editions of the podcast, and we've got a great slate of guests lined up for you guys there as well. We'll have Congressman Mike Harriadopoulos, Mark Harris, and Josh Burkeen, and we'll also be joined by Senator Roger Marshall as well. So on behalf of the pod team, I'm Roan. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and take care.
China. You go over to China. China. You take China. China. I love them. China. I have to have my China. China because China. You know, China. I know China very well. China. Northwest Wisconsin, where I'm from. It's China to me.